Yeah, just bumped into the body corporate rep at our block of flats. By the way, it's a Monday morning in Cairns. Just got to head off for a few checkups and things, so I'll get that out of the way. But yeah, we're talking about he's got problems with noisy neighbours, as I've mentioned, and the neighbour I've got, he asked about him and said I told them that outside the entrance to the flat downstairs from me there's a whole lot of cigarette butts, been there for days. That was after their all-nighter, and they just don't have any social responsibility at all. It's just back to the wild kingdom, dog eat dog type mentality to life. It's very disappointing. Hopefully they'll straighten out as they get older, but at the moment they're not endearing themselves to people there, so just the way it is. Oh boy, I got myself, did something rather radical on Saturday and got myself another video game. It's a city builder called ANNO. I don't know why it's called ANNO 1800, and it's all based on building up a city from scratch during the Industrial Revolution, which I find quite an interesting period of history actually. So I was quite happy to try it. It cost me 36 bucks. It's reduced in price. It was released last year, late last year. Now you can pick it up for a hell of a lot less. I think it was about a 60% discount on the original price they had. So it's just the basic game. But one thing's interesting, if you try a new video game, this one doesn't explain much, and it's very hard to get information on it, and it was driving me crazy. I couldn't work out how to expand my city. And what you could do is build up all these little farm settlers in little, they're like city blocks, and you got to get as many as them going so you can get new technology. But I wasn't aware that's how it worked, and no one has explained that online that I can find. And so it's a totally different approach to, say, feudal village. So I just thought I had a dud copy or something fundamentally wrong with it, but no, you just basically got to build up your population to get hold of new technologies and be able to exploit new resources. So, but I'll tell you what, the visuals are brilliant. It's one of the best looking games I've ever seen. It's just superb topography, you know, of the islands that you're inhabiting. It's a very impressive looking game, and that's why, you know, I was attracted to the eye candy, I've got to admit. But it got decent reviews as well, so I thought, what the hell, 36 bucks is bugger all these days. A lot cheaper than you can get from elsewhere. I had a look around, and you do need to shop around if you're going to buy a video game. I ended up getting it from, I think it's called Ubisoft, the Australian arm of the software developer for the game. And that seemed about the best deal that I could get. Even though there were terrible reviews for the actual company online, I still decided to go ahead with it, because one of the reviews said that in the Australian site you couldn't download the game, but that wasn't my experience. It worked perfectly well. So I took the risk. I thought 36 bucks, what the hell? Presumably if Trump wins, I'll have 180 bucks in my gambling account, so I'll use it as part of the winnings. Not that I'm living hand to mouth, I can afford to buy this sort of crap, but I never like to pay too much for something. You know, if you can get something cheaper, go for it. Just get value for money. Yeah, the news on Victoria is supposedly good, but Daniel Andrews seems to be tone deaf to this situation. There was no cases in the last 24 hours, yet he's still making small business suffer. I think he has a fundamental hatred of private enterprise. He's a classic socialist, dogmatic authoritarian who basically will not move. He's just stubborn as. He's got a few tendencies that he shares with Scott Morrison, in my opinion. I don't think he's going to go down as a great leader overall, even though he's incredibly popular at the moment. I think that popularity will start to erode, but it would help if the press actually scrutinised a few of his dud policies. He's got a couple of green policies there that are really going to cost the country a lot of money. First one is Snowy 2.0, which I've mentioned, which engineers have looked at and said it's dodgy as hell. But you know, Scott knows better than the engineers. He knows everything. The other one is, of course, that subcontract, which is the most absurd setup, simply because they want to placate the green lobby in Australia, because they want to have lead acid battery submarines which have very short range, and they've rationalised it. That's good for our defence, but I think it's total bullshit. You want more. You want a modern submarine. If you don't go nuclear, you should at least have nickel iron or something like that, a more modern type battery that can go much further. And the Japanese are developing such a battery right now. But no, we're sticking with the French situation where you've got to downgrade a nuclear sub to a lead acid Mickey Mouse version of it, and we're paying big bucks for it. It's the most insane contract I've ever heard of, and it's Scott Morrison who was clapping enthusiastically signing the contracts. In my opinion, Scott Morrison on policy is an absolute dud. The only good thing they've done, I mean, this will be balanced. The Liberals have at least made humanities and social science subjects at university more expensive than STEM subjects, which is science, technology, mathematics. And I think that's a very good thing, because our country is being dumbed down all the time at the moment. And I don't have a very high opinion of our education industry. I think it's pretty ordinary. Here's Lily Creek. It's warm, I tell you. It's much warmer than on my previous walk. But it's still a very pleasant part of the world to be. A little cooler down here. It's about 9:30 Monday, so don't know if I'll see many groups of people just relaxing. No one here at the moment. This is the spot you'd usually find someone. Anyway, yeah, so that's Scott Morrison, but Daniel Andrews is even worse. The guy's an absolute psycho, in my opinion. He's really pushing private business to the brink, and they're getting pretty upset about it. I think it's coming to a head. As I say, I think Labor will eventually make the decision that this guy is way too doctrinaire and unstable to lead their party, and he'll get the boot. He's already unpopular with a certain number of MPs, but it'll take a fair bit to push them. But you can only hope it'll be a great Christmas present if Dan goes into the dustbin of political history in Victoria. You can only hope. I really feel for what the poor Victorians are going through. As I say, I've got friends down there that are suffering at the moment. I didn't hear from them actually about football. I thought they might actually ring up, but they didn't. Yes, but no, they didn't contact me. But the other thing that Victoria is doing, another insane thing, I mean, it's bad enough as is, they've got legislation out there apparently to protect the victims of crime, I think sexual crimes, and the way it's drafted is it's going to basically gag everybody involved in the crime, including the victims and the families of the victims. So that's insane. It's just basically another way of eroding free speech, which is something that the hard left seem to be great at. They're the most anti-liberty free speech group around, and if Victorians want to live in a police state where you can't say or think what you want, good luck to you, because you're going to need to basically make a stand against these maniacs and push for more freedom. A free society is a more affluent society in the long term, whether it's social freedom or economic freedom. You should get both, and if you do, you'll have a much more affluent society. I mean, they always thought Singapore was fairly authoritarian, but I think they've at least got free speech. I haven't heard any issues there, and they certainly have a very free economy, so there's something to aspire to there. I think Australia's fallen off the curve a bit, but then again, we've got in effect a Green Prime Minister. He's pushing green policies, and people aren't even aware of it. And of course the press aren't going to argue about it, because they're pretty hard left themselves. They're activists, they're not journalists. There's very few real journalists around, and it's a very sad state of affairs. Our institutions have been eroded by these lunatics coming out of university with all these great ideas about how wonderful socialism is without really understanding what they're talking about. And I mean, I've copped it myself at uni. I went to uni, to a fairly radical uni, La Trobe Uni, back in the 70s. And, you know, you could see the seeds of what was going to happen. These lunatics eventually get into positions of power and influence, and what was regarded as fringe ideologies is now regarded as mainstream. And unless we break this cycle, I think we're doomed. At least in the short term, anyway, short and medium term. We really need to turn this around. And that's why the Trump election is very important. It's similar to the Queensland election in that there's corruption as part of one of the big issues now. You've got the Biden and his son with the Ukrainian deals, which is just absurd. It's obviously just corruption 101. And then you've got the Jackie Trad stuff in Queensland. There's parallels there, both left-wing, one an opposition leader and the other an incumbent, in the case of Anastasia Palaszczuk. Yeah, my friend told me he was living in Brisbane, so he's going to vote marijuana party, which I've done in the past when I was a bit younger, just as a bit of a shit stir. And but he gave his preference to Labor. I didn't actually argue with him about the Jackie Trad thing. I think he knows where I stand politically, but at least it hasn't destroyed our friendship, which is something fairly unique these days, because I've lost a lot of friends from speaking my mind, and it's rather sad. And university used to be a place where you could discuss freely. That was one of the great strengths of it. Now it's an indoctrination factory, so it's not good. There's a few people out and about. I see a walker and 2 bike riders, so yeah. Whew, it's a warm one. I'm handling it okay. Maybe the humidity's not so bad. It's going to get warmer as the day goes on. Probably gets about the hottest around midday, I think, go according to the chart. Midday to early afternoon, and it cools down a bit. So yeah, there's 2 guys and a girl on the bikes pass me by. So yeah, there's a few people using the facilities, which is great. It's one of the good things about being here. There's not that many people around, and you know, you don't get totally crowded out. I mean, if I was in Melbourne before peak hour, during normal Melbourne, I mean pre-COVID Melbourne, if you're down the Yarra, you'd have a stack of people commuting on bikes as well as public transport and cars. So, but I'm sure that's all changed. Dan's going to run the place into the ground. We'll go pre-industrial if he had his way. Oh dear. Crazy world we live in. How this could actually happen. I would never have picked 2020 the way it's turned out. I don't think anybody would have. I mean, there's been people talking about pandemics, but it's not the pandemic so much. It's the response to the pandemic that's a surprise. Our society has become so risk averse that like I say, it's the actual response that's doing more damage than good. And I've said this 100 times, and I'll keep saying it. If we just targeted the most vulnerable people and allowed the economy to tick along, we wouldn't be experiencing so much pain. But the whole country's suffering because Victoria's dragging down the rest. Oh, there's actually a ComSec poll showing who's the best performing state on a number of criteria. Now, I don't know how dodgy this criteria is, but ComSec is Commonwealth Securities, Commonwealth Bank. And they rated Tasmania as the top performing state. I think to a large degree because their real estate's held up, although I thought that the prices are softening now. So I don't know about that. It sounds like a pretty dodgy index. It actually has New South Wales down on the list, which I think is probably the best performing state overall. And Queensland is right down the bottom. But, you know, is that going to hurt Anastasia? Big question. I don't know if it is. I think a lot of electors, they vote on personalities, not hard policies. I mean, look at Biden. He runs away from confronting any policies. It's just, in America, like democracy's dead when the candidates are trying to avoid the media any scrutiny whatsoever. That's very dangerous. Please consider subscribing to my channel if you think there's anything there of use to you, or entertainment or whatever. And either do that or give me a thumbs up, or if you're feeling really energetic, do both. That'd be great. But please don't ignore me. That's the worst thing you can do on YouTube, is be ignored.